Now, with that background in place, okay, Gary's question can be phrased very easily and visually now, right? What is the empirical difference between these two causal chains, right? Top causal chain, right? This is the one which Gary prefers, okay? Yes, we use the intentional language of fairness, okay? Everything is happening here in this is an intentional language, normative vocabulary of agency. But, okay, there's a little star there, right? The star says this isn't really free will. It's just complex determinism, which is masquerading as free will, right? Now, the arrow between these two bubbles is kind of fuzzy. Nobody's really told that story yet, but let's granted this grain of salt right now, okay? So Gary's question, what's the difference between this causal chain and the one I prefer, right? Where there's non-deterministic processes happening, which, on some higher level emergent, kind of thing. Notice I'm hand-waving here too, right? But, nobody really has a good story about how the physical thing gets to the normative thing, right? But, so we're going to grant everybody their grains of salt for this, right? So Gary's question is, what's the difference between these two causal chains, right? Basically, what he's saying is, and what Miscellaneous is saying, I'm doing the top thing. That's what I'm doing, okay? Why should you come along and tell me that I should be doing the bottom thing? What's so much better about the green oval than the pink oval, right? The pink oval is where it's at. Okay. Now let me compare this with another causal chain, okay? Okay, this isn't the only question we could ask, right? What's the difference in this causal chain? Well, fairness is there, but it's not really free will. It's just complex determinism that's looking like free will. And this causal chain, right? Well, it isn't really free will, but we're just all in the matrix, right? So, in other words, yes, Gary, you're absolutely correct. There is no empirical evidence I can give you right now at the present moment to distinguish between these causal chains. But, okay, this star that's there, these stars there, they're metaphysical assumptions, right? And I've watched several of your other videos, right? And there's another video of yours that I favorited, where you say very clearly, okay, this is an assumption I'm bringing to reality, that induction works this way. This is an assumption I'm bringing to reality, that it's deterministic, right? Same way, if I bring a different assumption, or maybe I bring the assumption to reality that I'm really in the matrix, right? Okay, what about these guys? Okay, Calvinism, right? What's the difference in these two causal chains? This isn't really free will, it's just complex determinism. Versus Calvinism. Well, this isn't really free will, it's just predestination by God. So say I had a different theory of induction, right? Say I had the theory of induction that says that, the only true knowledge we can have about the world is revealed knowledge given to us by direct religious revelation from God as expressed in His holy books, right? And my understanding of those books says that we're predestined to do everything, okay? Now notice, okay, I want to make a very important point here. I am not trying to pillory your position here, okay? Basically, I take this causal chain very seriously. Okay, now let me tell you why, okay? Historian David Zarafsky has a nice discussion about Abraham Lincoln's second inaugural address. He calls it, basically, what Abraham Lincoln was doing was making a national theology. If you read his second inaugural address, it's very much in this vein. Okay, he follows this Calvinistic model, basically that it was predestined that God predestined that there was slavery. God predestined that slavery was going to end, and everything's going to work out for good in the end. And so, if you judge a metaphysical assumption on the basis of the results gained, this metaphysical assumption actually has a lot to be said for it. Okay. Abraham Lincoln needed that comfort. He needed the assurance that this causal chain gave him in order to, he was playing with the lives of millions of people, right? And, issues were at stake here about the survival of the nation. And he really needed this comfort in this time of war to reassure himself that everything was going to turn out okay in the end. And I think the nation needed it too, which is why his second inaugural address resonated so much, and which is why, this is how you get your name or your face carved in granite on Mount Rushmore, giant sized, right? Is how you really articulate what the nation needs at that point, right? So I'm not putting down any of these metaphysical assumptions, right? But Okay, the point is these are metaphysical assumptions, and the empirical evidence is not going to, this transaction with the kids with the pie. None of this stuff is going to tell you any difference between any of these causal chains, right? Okay, now this really is a secularized version of this Calvinistic causal chain, right? I mean, we've taken out God, and we've taken out any guarantees, really, that it's all going to turn out okay in the end. But I would imagine that this gives you some of the same benefits as Calvinism does. Sort of a sense of you do your best to try to do something right, and if it doesn't turn out okay, you don't beat yourself up about it too much, right? Because it was going to happen anyways, basically, right? So it's basically a secularized version of this Calvinistic thing, this deterministic assumption we're bringing towards the world, right? So, anyway, let's put all these guys on the board together, and let's take a look, subject all of these to the closest scrutiny and see how this evidence flows during this pie cutting example here, right? Okay, so yes, it's very true. Okay, the evidence that will not disambiguate this stuff, right? Okay, the evidence is that happy kids and adults. The evidence is, phrased in the same question that the problem was phrased in. It's phrased in this blue language. It's phrased in this intentional stance language, right? It's phrased in this thing. The kids were happy. They thought I did what I should. They gave them I gave them a fair shake, basically, right? Now, the evidence that we have confirms all the blue bubbles, right? It confirms the intentional stance, right? But the evidence does not disambiguate at all among the pink bubbles, right? This is basically your point, right? Okay, now, my point is, okay, this is true, but, I mean, the evidence does confirm the blue bubbles, which means that, far from this equivalence or this multiple implementation ability, it doesn't drain the evidence away from the blue bubbles. Actually, it focuses the evidence on the blue bubbles. I mean, the blue bubbles are the only thing that all three of these things have in common, and they're the only things which our empirical evidence can fund, right? I mean, we can tell when we're approaching a complex system whether or not it's okay to take the intentional stance with it. We judge it by how smooth and fluid the transactions go, right? We don't have any test for these other metaphysical assumptions, right? Okay. Now, what you're probably thinking right now is, wait a minute, I can't see God, but I can dissect a brain. I mean, it's like, this thing is, this physicalistic assumption about determinism, is it really on all fours with all these guys? And, of course you're going to prefer the top one of these, Gary, right? Because this coheres with your assumptions about induction, how induction works. This coheres with your worldview, right? Okay, and so let's double click on this deterministic causal chain. So this is basically the top row, and I've expanded out all the options here, right? So let's, if we really want to say that this is causally deterministically caused at every step of the way, this is what it looks like, right? We start out from the Bohm interpretation of quantum mechanics, right, which is a deterministic interpretation of quantum mechanics, all right? So since that's deterministic, that makes the quantum mechanics deterministic, which makes the chemistry deterministic, which makes the neurons deterministic, which makes all of our higher level behaviors deterministic, which makes the fairness deterministic in the end, right? Okay, well, my strategy, okay, throughout this entire video series has been to subject each stage of this, each stage of this causal chain to the strictest scrutiny, right?